All right. Facebook Live, Sonic Ninjas, episode 6.
What's going on, everybody?
Bradley Dean, how are you, buddy?
Doing good. It's a good Friday.
It is. I never thought we would make it to episode 6. I thought we'll be canceled by then.
We didn't get canceled.
Not yet.
We haven't been able to renegotiate our contracts yet, but we're working on it.
We'll do what Friends did, which is we stick together and negotiate it evenly. Everybody gets the same, even split.
Exactly. As long as we have more than 30 people viewing, we'll be good.
Yeah, well, so far we got 14 people. Let's give them a second to kind of hopefully join in. Today, as we mentioned before on our announcement videos, we're going to talk a lot about drums, drummers, drum processing, mics on drums, drums for in-ears, drums for front of house. You know, what's that?
Air drumming.
Air drumming, which I like to do. You know me and the bus. We air drum a lot.
Yes, we do.
And is it me or your mic is cutting out again?
Oh, it's not cutting out again.
It's not cutting out again. Okay.
Then it's you me interrupting me.
Oh, well, sorry.
No, I think all is well.
I like your beer. It's like cotton candy. I kind of want to reach and just grab some.
Do you?
You should make it pink though.
I think it's getting out of control.
A little bit. It blends with the microphone too. It's like it kind of.
It's right in. Look at that. It's just like an extension.
Before I forget, I always want to say thank you to Jeff Subaru for allowing us to use his great music. If you like that music, please go check him out. His project name is Patrito, and he has a lot of killer songs. And Jeff is our guitar player with Enrique. So, but he has, obviously, he's very versatile and does a lot of rock stuff. And so, yeah, check him out, Patrito. Thank you, Jeff, for your music.
Gracias.
See, I knew your Spanish would get better. So you went from claro to gracias.
That's right. Every day I throw something at you that it just blows your mind.
It's a curveball, yes. I like it though because it keeps me on my toes. I'm like, wow, he learned a new word. That's good.
If I can form a sentence.
Yeah, I mean we got to work on that. I think your next announcement of Sonic Ninjas episode 7 should be in Spanish. You do the Spanish one and I'll do the English one.
In episode 7?
7, yes.
7.
See, that wasn't bad. Episodio 7.
Claro.
I knew it. Your Spanish will get pretty good.
We'll get better.
So we got, Ruben has joined us. Michael Sweeney has joined us. So far, I mean, there's other people, but maybe I need to refresh. Anyway, so what have you been up to lately? Are you still recording?
I am still recording.
Yeah?
Still tracking guitar. And I did this thing yesterday with JBL, with Raul Gonzalez and Oysen. I can't remember his last name, forgive me. And Bill Hanley.
That's the Woodstock guy, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that. That's cool.
He's the guy. He's pretty much the guy who created, concert sound. He pretty much invented it. He was hired to do Woodstock. He was hired to design the system for an expected audience of 100,000 people. Well,
500,000 showed up, or something like that.
600,000 people turned
Jesus.
up, and nothing failed. They had 30 days to do the setup. He created everything basically out of necessity. There was no, boxes that were designed to handle that large of a crowd, if they were designed at all. And yet everything worked. He told a story about how they had to put ice cubes on the power amps to keep them cool.
Wow.
Yeah, and nothing failed. That's what amazes me. In a group of 500,000 to 600,000 people, you just created something for the first time ever, and it worked.
Talk about innovating.
Right, exactly. And his whole concept was, he aligned all the components up in a line. So all the 15s were in a column, all the 12s, everything was in a column. So if you think about that and think about line array technology today, he kind of started it. So he knew something with the math or the way, he wanted to throw the sound.
The way things will couple, he already had a vision for that.
And I mean, it was really informative.
How long ago
really
was
cool.
that? That was 51 years ago, maybe? What was it? No, 50 years ago?
69. So, yeah.
It wasn't 69, so that's 51 years ago?
52?
Damn.
51, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that airs next Thursday. It's called Audio Matters.
That's cool, man.
It was really cool.
Man,
Yeah.
and what is, like, it's funny because look what he was doing, and then we're like, I can't get my iPad to work.
Right. They built the consoles to mix the show.
Old knobs, probably.
Oh, it was incredible. I can't imagine being under that kind of pressure. I mean, yeah, you got 30 days to do it, but then the actual day, and you're like, thunderstorms, and is it all going to work? And
I can barely get OBS to work, and how did they get that thing to work?
it only took us an hour to get this up and running today.
It only took us an hour, an hour with you, and like another 10 hours before to even troubleshooting just to get this up and running. But I guess it's what we do to be able to reach out to our friends, and share some stories. That's cool, man, that you got to talk to him and
yeah, that was a real treat.
And it airs again when?
I think it's next Thursday.
Oh, that's cool.
Find some information on the Harman site or JBL, or I'll probably post something when I get a link. But it was really cool. We talked for like 2 hours. I'm pretty sure they're going to edit it down some, but it was a really great conversation.
That's cool. We've been busy too, doing. I did that mentorship program thing that was pretty cool. With Berkeley College, and yesterday I had a webinar with Waves, so that was kind of exciting too. And there were subtitles, so I'm sure you understood partially what happened.
I think, and Chad Olick was on there. We were able to watch because of the subtitles.
There you go.
And I had to heckle you a little bit.
You have to. Otherwise we wouldn't be ourselves. So that was kind of cool. And then today we have, episode 6 of Sonic Ninjas. And so yeah, man, this is exciting. Like I said, I didn't think we would last this long, but it's almost like we like the challenge of getting this going. So like we said earlier, today we're going to talk about drummers, drum processing. So I guess what would be your first question? How do you approach drums, or do you play drums? Have you ever played drums, or what's your affinity for drums?
Drums are the one instrument that I can play great in my head and air drumming. But the minute I sit down behind the kit, it all goes out the window. I can't grasp the concept of, maybe it's the hitting of the things, the looseness of the wrists or whatever. But, that's the one instrument that I always wanted to be able to play that I can't. I mean, I have a drum set sitting in my living room all mic'd up, but the dog wants to eat the kick drum every time I sit down to play. Can't, got to lock the dog in the bedroom.
I can play good enough to, tighten it up in Pro Tools later,
Right. Well, yeah, I put up, I think it was the one day before that DPA event, I put up all the microphones, and I actually no, I put the what was it, the 4011s up as overheads, and I recorded just the overheads, and I came down to my studio to listen. I managed to kick out a beat for 15 seconds before it sounded like shoes in a dryer. but
my brother's a drummer, so I have a very close connection to that, and I like playing percussion and dabble on drums, but I think because of that connection, that I've always been very close to a drummer. I have a lot of drummer friends. I connect with them very quickly, and when I'm working with an artist or a band, drums are something that I gravitate towards, and I always like trying to get those drums to sound big, and I guess most engineers like that. The goal is to make them big and solid and wide, and so that's kind of a cool thing. I think drums are the biggest challenge also live sound, because it's the one with the most mics, I would think.
Exactly, and drums are the one thing that it drives the mix, I think. Good drum sound, and it's just that's the thing that gets you moving, to me anyway.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like you say, it's it's drums. It's I consider it one instrument, but yet, like you say, it could have, if you're a mad scientist, it could have up to 48 inputs for the drum kit.
Yeah.
But the key to a good drum sound, I think, is to make it sound like one instrument, not like kick, snare, hat, rack, floor, you know, overheads.
Man, we're always on the same wavelength, man. I was just talking about that and in that in the waves thing I did yesterday in the webinar because it was focused on drums and I was actually focusing on mixing a drum kit with only groups, nothing on the inputs. So how to tailor the sound of it. And the reason I did that, because I know some people wondering, why don't you just put a channel strip on the kick and the snare and the bottom? I didn't on purpose because I wanted to demonstrate another approach, an approach of trying to treat the drum kit as one thing, as one instrument. Because otherwise I feel like it will be treating a guitar on a per string basis,
Exactly.
I just don't see that. Yes, of course, we can manipulate one instrument if we need to, or the production of the music or the live show calls for it, of course. But I just wanted to show a different point of view of like, let's process the whole kit as one and let's focus it as one, and it was pretty cool. It was very interesting, and I like always, not that it surprises me that we're in the same wavelength or we kind of think alike, but it's cool to get that reinforcement that someone like yourself, thinks the same way and approaches drums the same way, Because we can, mad scientists, you just mentioned it. We could go crazy with the technology and put mics and double, triple mic things. And, as engineers, I guess it'll be fun maybe for the challenge, but it's a really serving a purpose. It's a really...
Yeah, I can speak on that because I actually did a gig where I filled in for a guy and the drum kit had top and bottom microphones and a trigger on each drum. And, I heard the show and it sounded amazing. So when I went to fill in, I wanted to hear everything like it was when I heard the show. I mean, it was cool, but it didn't really warrant, the extra time that it took, make sure top and bottom mics are, aligned in phase. It didn't make that big of a difference to me and of course the setup time, and all the different mic stands and clamps and everything, I kind of ditched all of that, and just simplified it. But it was really interesting that, you would take that approach.
Now, were the triggers being used for samples or were they being used to trigger, on a sidechain or keying a gate?
There were samples. So
Okay.
triggers, being used for samples.
Because I know there's a lot of people who use them to just key into a gate just to open it up,
Yeah.
That's an interesting concept too. I know it gets used a lot in metal.
Yeah.
I haven't done that a lot, maybe once or twice, maybe.
Yeah, I did it once when I worked with this band, and the ride cymbal sat right over top of the floor tom. And it was really like right over top of it. So every time he hit the ride cymbal, it opened up the floor tom microphone.
Oh.
So I tried everything to try and get that to not happen, and to where we even put, a trigger on there that would just trigger the gate. And I tried it a couple of times. I'm like, okay, it kind of works, but maybe I'll just, open up the gate on that floor tom, so it's kind of open all the time. And when he hits the ride, it's not like this happening,
Yeah, that's kind of a annoying sound once you're getting that,
Yep.
The whole it's like, ugh.
And you hear it instantly.
Oh yeah, it drives me nuts.
You hear it instantly, and you wonder, and you scramble to try and fix it, and you're like, man, I wonder if anybody else notice that. They did the roll around a tom, and the cymbals are opening up, and
I know, and that's and when you that's amplified, and also in the in-ears too. I have to be very cautious when I'm using gates and stuff like that, and I use them, but I have to make sure that the way it's translating, it doesn't it's not going to everybody in their ears, because then they'll be like, there's gates on it. I'm trying to make them invisible.
So a lot of times I won't even use a gate on the snare top, because that way I'm never going to hear the hi-hat. I'm never going to get that explosion of the hi-hat.
Yeah.
Plus the snare is going to come through the overheads as well. There's a big overlooked part of a drum kit, I think, is the overheads.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you and I were talking about that the other day too, about how much to filter it, how much to use of it for the whole drum set, right? And I mentioned that I normally like to use them strictly for the cymbals, depending on what I'm doing, of course. And I'm talking live at this point, not in the studio, but I usually like to filter them, I used to at least, mostly to like 400, and then just mostly focus on the cymbal sound for it. And then I kind of started bringing it back a hair, but as you were saying too, you use it to get a little bit of that body for the snare, maybe the toms a hair, right?
Yeah, I do. And the same thing when I first started mixing, it was automatic. 400 would be the high pass on the overheads, and I would focus on the cymbal sound. And then I don't know, it was a couple years into my mixing career when somebody said to me, "Hey, listen to the toms in the overheads." And when I did, I'm like, "Oh, let's back the high pass down a little bit more." And you get, a little bit warmer sound. And then I realized that overheads are such an integral part of the whole drum, sound for the toms and for the snare. I got a lot of snare drum that comes through my overheads, and I compress the overheads a lot so that I get that, you can feel the kit moving, and the snares coming through the overheads. The overheads are compressing when the snare hits, and then the release is kind of, medium to slower. So I mean,
so that way you're not choking it. That way you just kind of, you still get that tail end.
I mean, my all-time favorite overhead sound is John Bonham. Those Led Zeppelin records, man. Those cymbals, just the way they decay.
I can still hear them now.
Yes, and it's like, how do I achieve that sound?
Yeah, live is tricky though for that kind of, because you have so much more going on. It depends on the drummers too. If their cymbals are just kind of sort of smaller live cymbals, then the decay will be lost at that point.
Yeah, I mean, cymbals and that sort of high frequency stuff, you do have to watch out for it, because there's so much other information going on. Number one, the crowd's screaming and yelling at 110 dB, and the singer's running around in front of the PA, and maybe he's running in front of the drum kit from time to time.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah.
You have to take all that into consideration.
Oh yeah, same for on my side. Monitors, when vocals runs around the drum kit, you got to be careful with that. Do they even need overheads in their mix?
Yep.
All those things. But I always try to give them that particular blended sound of a whole drum kit. I don't want the drum kit to stick out in a way where it's just poking. All of a sudden, the kick and snare are kind of like there, and all of a sudden, one rack tom is like really loud. Or I try to make it like a whole sound, like a whole drum set, one instrument, not 10, not 10 pieces of a drum kit. Or
it becomes disjointed. And imagine as a player trying to play to that sort of mix.
Yeah.
Makes it so much more enjoyable for the listener as well.
Yeah, and for the listener, meaning the audience, and also for the player, we've been fortunate to work with, great drummers. Like I said, I also gravitate to drummers, so a lot of my friends are drummers, and it's a cool thing, man. Especially when they're playing and they're happy, it changes the way they approach things. They're not worried about their sound. They know they can play. They know you're not choking all the ghost notes out. They're not like, that's a very sensitive subject, I think, for drummers too. That I had people come in and just tap it with their fingers and go, "Do you have a gate on my drums?"
Huh?
It's like, I'm like, "Yeah." Well, can you take it out? I was like, "No." And it's not me being a dick about it. It's more like, are you gonna do that when you on the show? Are you gonna tap the tom with your finger? And they're like, "No." Okay, then just play a little bit, and then start hitting the toms, and tell me if you don't hear even the smallest hit. And they try it and they go, "Okay, it's cool." It's but I think a lot of times they had bad experiences with gates. But I think if it's handled, especially, I mean, we're in digital consoles and everything, so we can automate. If it's a song where they play really light, then I'll automate that. So in that song, no matter what happens, either they open quickly, or maybe in that song I won't have the gates. But in a song that is loud and a lot of action and a lot of cymbals, and I know he's going to hit it hard, so gain is not an issue, the gates are on, The gates are on with a long release, and a medium hold so it doesn't choke anything. But I think sometimes you got to do those things to clean it up. And it's been a sort of taboo, I guess, to use them. Some drummers just hate it, I guess it depends how you're going to use it. This time where I split up the drums in two, like a snare, I'll split it in two. One that is gated completely where it just pop, and then the other one's wide open. And I blend the two so we don't lose any of the ghost notes, but the other one's really tightly gated, compressed, and maybe that's the one that I'll send to the effects, for instance, or, So this different ways, I guess, to keep everybody happy.
I always used to think that maybe gates were invented because nobody could tune drums, and that was a way of calming down the ring of the tom with the gate.
I guess that's partially true, but
I think it is. But it's also to get more separation from things, and
also to be able to turn them up that loud with maybe that much body without them going off on the PA or something. Let's take a quick moment to acknowledge who's watching us. We got Reed and William, Bill. William, what's going on, buddy? Thank you for joining us. James Hopkins. John Oilsey. I don't know how to say his last name. I probably butchered it, but thank you for joining us. Joe Miramontes. Hello, Sonic Genius. Chris Sharpie. Sharpie's watching us. For those who don't know, Sharpie's our audio tech. Yeah, he. Without him, we're lost. He does an amazing job of keeping all our audio needs in check.
Sharpie's definitely an audio ninja for sure.
Oh, absolutely. We should have him over one time. We should have him on this thing.
Good.
And then, he's amazing.
And he's trying to fix everything.
Yes, yeah. He's the best. Ice Cube and Power Amps, they were like going, yikes. That was a good part of that story. I love that.
I'm not seeing all this. I guess I have to refresh.
Yeah, and I actually earlier, man, we just suck at this, don't we? I guess I was watching it through my page, and for some reason, I had to refresh it like a couple of times, but then I went back to the Sonic Ninja page.
Okay. Did you ever have the privilege of using the Gatekeeper? It was made by Peavey.
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I don't think so.
No. Well,
I would have remembered probably.
It was called the Gatekeeper.
Was I born when that came out, Bradley Dean?
Maybe not. But I did run in South America with Cyndi Lauper, and we were in some venue somewhere. I can't remember where. And I walked to front of house to see what I'm going to use today. And I look, and there's the Peavey Gatekeeper. And it's 5 channels.
5?
Is it 5 channels? Okay. So, and I'm thinking, okay, I got more than 5 drums. What am I going to do? Okay, well, I'll do this. I won't gate the snare top or bottom, and everything will be fine. And then the systems guy comes in. He's like, hey, don't worry, I got more gear coming. I'm thinking, oh, great, there's another rack coming. Maybe I won't have to use the Gatekeeper. So he brings the rack in, and he opens up the lid, and there's another Gatekeeper. Oh, I got 10 channels of the Gatekeeper. I shit you not, that's what it was called, the Gatekeeper.
Wow. And it was just a gate?
Close.
Did it have filters or anything?
No, it just opened and closed. That's it. It's like 2 knobs.
Wow.
It was interesting, though.
It was probably opening constantly, I would assume.
But why 5 channels, do you think?
I don't know, but in some ways, funny enough, I think it makes sense because if you do kick, snare, and 3 toms.
Yeah, which is a standard drum kit, more or less.
Yeah.
Rack, floor, kick, snare. That's 5 inputs.
So it kind of makes sense that it's 5.
Yeah.
But then everything turned out to be 4, 2 channels, 4 channels.
Yep.
I wonder why. Well, I guess the industry somehow standardizes things, and everything's in pairs because of stereo. I would assume,
Exactly.
and then four. Why not four instead of why not three instead of four? Well, I guess four. You got two stereo pairs now,
Yep.
and then five. They probably found it to be odd, except for the gatekeeper. Let's see who else is here. Oh, what about? Here's a question. I guess it's our first question from James Hopkins. What are your thoughts on running a separate board for the drum kit and busing it into the main as a single? Short answer for me, at least. I mean, probably a waste of resources, my opinion.
What's the difference, really?
Yeah, I mean,
If it's a car or if it's all in front of you, I prefer to have everything right in front of me.
yeah, but are you doing that because maybe I will see the only way I see that happening is if it's one of those shows that has 2, 3, 4 drummers because it's some kind of tribute to something, and they have tons of drummers, and then maybe you want to have just, 4 stereo returns of your drum kit in front of everything else of the band. You know what I mean? Like, so you mix all the drum kits in this big console, you bust them in groups, send them back to the main mixer, and you have 4 drums that are coming back in stereo, and then the rest of the band, and it's all in front of you. That will be the only use that I will find for that, I think, having the drums separate in a different console, right? What do you think, Brad?
You had a C stage and there was a full drum kit. And so that at that moment, maybe you spun around because you're facing the C stage. You got a little sidecar drums and some other inputs. And
oh, you mean like to be able to physically turn around and watch something else?
for a second part of the show where they go to a different part of the arena to perform. Yeah. Now it's a different drum kit and now it's on my sidecar. Maybe. Yep. I don't know.
Yeah, but even that, I mean, I know we have plenty of inputs and
plenty of inputs, plenty of layers.
Put some wheels, and you get wheels, just turn your console around like this.
Right.
I mean, with your layouts too, you can literally just, if we're on the C stage, which I tend to do my C stage layout, boom, and then before you know it, my layout is different for that particular part of the show. So yeah, I mean, interesting concept, but I think for me, I would find it useful if we were mixing a lot of drummers for some kind of special event.
Yeah.
VJ Kumar says, always 8 mics on the snare. Nice. William Rotman, he's a good friend of mine, singer-songwriter, and also we play video games together. He's a good player. He asked, what order do you lay out drums on your mixer window?
Kick, snare bottom, hat, rack, floor, ride, overhead.
Standard.
Yeah, standard, right down the list.
Yeah, same here, except for some reason live I do it that way. In the studio, for some reason, maybe because I'm not looking at a band, or I always have kick, snare, hat, floor, rack 2, rack 1. And then overheads, of course, left and right, the way I will see them if I was standing in front of the house. Same with room mics. So
panning your toms in the studio, audience perspective or drummer perspective?
I always do audience. I never ever, unless requested, or if I find out the drummer is a lefty, maybe. But I always do it audience perspective. You?
I don't know. I kind of like drummer perspective a lot of the times.
In the studio.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it's from air drumming.
Yeah.
The floor tom's over here.
It's all those years of air drumming.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually kind of the way I go, is drummer perspective. But there's really no right or wrong, though, So you know what I did?
Yeah.
Since I knew we were going to talk about drums and drummers.
Yeah.
I made a list of the drummers that I have gotten to work with, because for the last 6 years, it's been Enrique and it's, Van Romain.
Badass drummer.
Badass drummer. Consistent. Every hit of every drum in every song, every night, exactly the same. Wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, we get our source for
Yeah.
drums is insanely good. Yes.
Which is, to me, is the key. That's one of the good things of a great drummer is consistency. And so as, us as mixers, exactly what's coming every single night. So Van Romain, Butch Vig, another incredible drummer, incredible songwriter, producer, person. Tommy Lee, John Tempesta, who played with the Cult.
Yeah.
Also played with Rob Zombie back in the day. Another incredible drummer. John was amazing. And he had the best sounding hi-hats of anybody I ever worked with. The hi-hats.
Wow. Were they big or were they like the small ones?
They just, no, they were smaller, but I think they were thinner. And so it sounded, I'm not a big fan of hi-hats because to me, they always sound like trash can lids most of the time.
Mute.
Yeah, mute and let them come through the overheads or whatever, the snare mic, whatever. And for me to remember somebody for their hi-hats, they just were the best sounding hi-hats.
Wow. What do you remember? What brand were they? Not to.
I don't remember, but it sounded exactly like you would imagine you would want hi-hats to sound like.
From the get-go.
The get-go, exactly. But you're always trying to EQ and compress and get it that nice, crisp sound that's not too harsh and brash.
Yeah.
But great drummer. Stephen Perkins with Jane's Addiction. Another amazing drummer. Don Brewer, who was with Bob Seger and also Grand Funk Railroad. That was another guy that his drums sounded exactly the same every single night. Every hit, perfect. And then I worked with a guy in Him called Gaz Lipstick. That was the drummer's name. That was his stage name.
I was going to say.
Now this guy, he was an incredible drummer and he played solid every song. It was the same. The intensity was exactly the same every song. But yet the singer was very dynamic and singing soft, singing loud. The band was just full on, great band. And he had this cymbal that sat right in line with the vocal mic. And it was like right in front of him. And he played that cymbal 95% of the show. And that was his ride cymbal. It was like right there. And every time the singer moved away from the microphone, it was just a psh, psh, psh. So I come up with the idea to put some plexi around this drum kit because that cymbal was never going to move. It was never going to go anywhere.
And were you able to put plexi on it?
Yeah, we put plexi around the kit and that solved the problem of the cymbal. Because I couldn't change the way the drummer was going to perform and I couldn't change the way the singer was going to sing.
A lot of people are very hesitant about doing that. Drummers sometimes don't like it, or just people in production per se, or the creative side. Sometimes they think, oh no, that doesn't look good.
Well, it does change the sound of the drum kit somewhat, for me, which is why I always insisted it go up at sound check.
Yeah. Well, that's because you were saying, you use the overheads a lot for the tone of the drum kit. For me, with the drums being close mic and everything, it doesn't bother me as much whether it's on or off, but it does encapsulate it slightly having it around. But I think it helps more than damage anything. Yeah.
And then one more drummer.
Go for it.
Would like to mention who I never got to mix, but I had the privilege of playing with in a band was Shannon Larkin, which, in my opinion, is one of the most.
Which band?
In Wrathchild, and also Souls at Zero and Back Alley Gators. I think the first time I had him up on stage with me in my band, which was Rat Zalad, he was 14 years old.
What? Wow.
Yeah, 14 years old, and the song we played was Running Free by Iron Maiden. And he was amazing at 14. now, at the age he's at now, playing with Godsmack, he's even more incredible. He's probably the best drummer on the planet, in my opinion.
That's awesome, dude.
I've never seen or played with anybody that was that not only technically proficient, but yet makes it look like you're brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. It's like arms and shits everywhere, and he makes it look so easy and fluid and it's incredible. He's a sight to see, and it was a real privilege and honor to be able to play with him for all those years. And I never really realized how visual he was until I went to see Godsmack, and then I was in the audience and I was watching him, and I'm like, that's what everybody was looking at when we were on stage. They were looking at him.
You didn't realize because you were facing the other way. Well, I didn't prepare a list, but off the top of my head, I can mention a couple of drummers that I loved working with, or that I've had the opportunity of working with, even if it was a one-off. Matt Sorum to me was one of the best rock drummers. He was also in the Cult, but he was a Guns N' Roses member. And when I did these shows, it was a small tour that we did. It was with the Kings of Chaos. So it was basically Guns N' Roses as the band with no Axl. In addition, Dave Kushner was there, so it became Velvet Revolver. And they had a few renowned singers like Joe Elliott from Def Leppard, Glenn Hughes from Deep Purple, Roland from Collective Soul, and Miles Kennedy from Alter Bridge. So the band was a super band. So it was pretty amazing to just see them perform, of course, a dream come true kind of thing. But what was pretty amazing to me is, and maybe we take this for granted, is everything they did was live. So there were no tracks, right? Not even a click track just for consistency issues or for whatever. Nothing. But he will start, and I could tell this because of my delays, because I will have to tap the delays. I was doing front of house. And normally I would tap throughout the song to keep matching what the band is playing all the way through for the singer, right? I kid you not, that I will tap it at the beginning of the song, and by the end of the song, every time it will land on the same number, like every time. Like this guy was a clock, but meanwhile, it feels like he's just driving. It almost feels like the choruses, he will drive him more and he will do all these things, but somehow it will stay. But it feels more energetic in certain areas. It blew my mind, Then
you had to play around the beat, on top of it.
Yeah, on top, behind, but it was still in the same tempo. So for me, I was able to tell that he was spot on because of my tap on the delay, because we had no clicks, no nothing, no tempo mapping or anything. And it was pretty amazing. And of course, the energy and how consistent he was when he was hitting the drums. That was pretty cool. Another great drummer live was when I did Tears for Fears, Jamie Wallem. He was amazing. And of course, with that music, there was some powerful portions of the songs, but then there was a lot of areas that had finesse, just very lightly played and just very musical drumming, and that to me is incredibly important, having those dynamics. Yes, if it's rock, you're balls to the wall, but if it's something like Tears for Fears, where you have the music that they have playing the way they're playing with those dynamics, and be able to pull it off and still give us a good source of sound without losing the integrity of the drum kit. Amazing,
I worked with a guy like that in Cyndi Lauper, Sammy Marandino.
Uh-huh.
Cindy would conduct the show at times, and Sammy was great at like following her and know when to play quiet and know when to lean on it and give it some push, and he was just constantly watching her.
Well, and that's also an incredible skill on its own of as a drummer or any musician, to be able to follow the artist and not be too loud when they're trying to like break it down. And some people they don't know how to break it down. Like the band broke it down and the drummer still like it's like no, everybody just broke it down. You should break it down too, or they go to the side stick, but then they just still hitting the kick drum
Right.
super loud. Like a good friend of mine, and I gotta say, not because he's my friend and I love him, but probably one of the best drummers that I worked with live and in the studio. His name is Randy Cook. Amazing, and I'm sure some people, when I mention his name, are gonna know who he is.
Isn't he playing on the track that you play in the intro and outro?
He's playing on the track. Yes, he played for this song for Jeff, and then, I mean, he's worked with a million people, like Dave Stewart, and he's played with Ringo. He's played. I mean, it's insane. His list is insanely long, but amazing drummer. One of the things that always impresses me is how he mixes himself when he's playing. Most drummers, he could be playing at rock, but he's like kicking snares like boom, bah, boom, bah. But his right is like control. You see his right hand, and he's not like whacking it just as hard as the snare. Right. It's like bah, bah. And then what happens when you're listening, whether you're standing in front of him or you're actually listening to the recording or you're live, it sounds balanced. It doesn't sound out of whack, Yeah.
How about this one? You get up, you listen to the drum kit, and the drums sound god awful.
Yeah.
But yet a great drummer sits behind them, and all of a sudden they sound perfect. Have you ever had that experience? Like you think, yes, surely he's going to get up there and tune those drums. And then he starts playing. It's like, holy shit, it sounds perfect.
Yeah. It's the player. A lot of times it's the player. And that happens with guitars too.
Yes, it does.
Like this time where I mean, you're in the studio or you're doing something or even live or whatever. And a musician could be, my guitar doesn't sound right. And then the tech grabs it or something. And then they start playing something and it sounds beautiful. You're like, yeah, I think we're good. We're fine. We're not like, there's nothing we can do. I think at some point it's the fingers, it's the way they hit the drums,
Yeah. It's the finesse.
It's the finesse, it's the strength, it's their dynamics, it's their approach, it's their energy. It's all these things combined that make for, getting for us a great source from the drum kit. Let's take a quick moment to see if anybody else has any cool questions here. There's Bruce, 10 on the cowbell. That's funny. 40 overhead. What's that?
Andreas is here.
He is.
And we haven't mentioned one plug-in.
I know. We should.
No, we want him to stick around for a little bit.
That's true. He goes, VJ, I think it's when we were talking about the channel count, says, I've done that. Some dude shows up with Neil Peart's drum kit, needed extra channels. So he had to submix the drum kit from one mixer to another one. That's going back to what we were talking about earlier. Bruce Dan says, we use triggers to key filter the drum gates on Slipknot in the early days. Yeah, that's what we were talking about as well earlier, that they use the triggers exclusively to trigger the gates and not necessarily for samples. I think it's a great technique to use. I'm sure it's a lot of work, but if you're in a tour situation, I guess once things are set up, they stay set up.
And it works perfectly every time. I mean, yeah. Hit the drum, trigger, it fires, and it opens up.
Yeah, I think that's a great option, especially if you have a fast drummer and you don't want the gates to be late or to be opening up with cymbals and stuff. You just set it with the trigger. As soon as that gets hit, it opens up. So I think that's a great way of doing it. Let's see. Gates in the click. VJ also says, in my opinion, overheads work well for drummers that know how to play the whole kit. Very true.
True.
It has
and
to
not
be
a drummer that's a cymbal basher.
Exactly. We got Jeff with us too. What's going on, Jeff? Angel Ramos. Let's see. Do you see any questions that you want to ask or any comments, Brad? Or should I keep going here?
Well, Oris Henry agrees with me on the in the studio, the drummer perspective, and obviously live it would be audience perspective. Who else? I don't see many questions.
What?
Oh, here we go. Jimmy Rickard has a question, which is what I was going to be my next thing we talked about, was the processing of the drums. Do you ever compress single drums or just the bus after submixed? You want me to go?
Yeah, you go and then I'll go.
For me, I put a little bit of compression on the kick, the snare, toms, overheads, hi-hat, and then I put some more compression on the subgroup. I put some heavy compression on a parallel group on the drums. So, yeah, but it's a little bit. You know, it might be 1 or 2 dB of compression on each individual instrument. The snare is going to be more compression depending on what type of sound I'm trying to get out of the snare drum. I might compress the bottom snare. I might do the CLA thing and just squash the shit out of the bottom snare and jack a lot of top end into it just to get some sort of, snap out of the bottom of the snare, but not so much live. It's more of a studio thing. So yeah, a little bit of compression on everything. And then more compression in the groups. And then there's compression in the master bus as well.
Yeah, same here. I mean, on the inputs, I feel that it's better to do your processing in small bits and then do all the broad strokes in your groups and the masters, so that way you don't hear one. If at the end, if it's a matter of level and you want to reduce or control the dynamic range of something by maybe 3 or 4 dB, instead of doing it with one unit, just doing one dB per unit as you go forward. Instead of compressing it really hard with one, just do it in stages and with different attack settings, so transients are still coming through and you don't lose that the feel, But yeah, I have processing on inputs, processing on groups, and on my master bus. And when I'm doing monitors, because I don't have the luxury of having the groups and being able to send aux to groups, then I'm focusing a lot on the master bus, which is going through the in-ears, to the in-ears, and then on the inputs. And if I feel that I need some kind of parallel processing, then I will choose something on the inputs that would allow me to that mix, that kind of dry wet mix on when it comes to compression that I can put on the kick or on the snare. If I feel that I want to be able to squash something and blend it with the instrument, then I'll do it that way. In the case of monitors,
Yep.
Let's see here. In the studio, in the old Glennis John 3 mic for drums still being used for, or is it passé with the availability of more and better technologies as well as electronic percussion and pop?
Well,
I think it's still being used and depends on what you're looking for, right?
Exactly. I was just going to say it depends on the style of music, and can you get away with 3 microphones on the drum kit? Is that the type of sound you're looking for? And
we also go back to, if you have a great drummer,
yeah,
and you have a great room. I mean, certainly I wouldn't do that live unless, no, probably not. But great room, great drummer, good drum set. I think you can get away with it. And if that's the sound you're looking for, 3 mics is great,
I don't really see it working so well in a live situation.
No.
I think, when Led Zeppelin reunited several years ago, I think Big Mick, I saw an interview with him, and I want to say that they tried that approach with the drum kit, keeping it more big and open sounding. And then they realized that they were just going to have to go back to the conventional way of doing things. I like the sound of a few mics on a drum kit.
Yeah, and I like the option of having the close mics if we need them,
Yeah.
I mean, live, of course, we need them all, but in the studio, a lot of times I'll start with trying to get the sound, if I'm looking for something organic or with the overheads in the room to see what they give me. And if they sound really good, then I'll tailor the drum sound to that. And then I'll start, if I need more punch or more attack on something, then I'll bring in the individual mics,
How about transient designers?
Oh, yeah. I use the Plug-in Alliance SPL Transient Designer. Live more than in the studio. In the studio, I will probably tend to go use a sample or something, but if I'm missing something. But live, yeah, that's very helpful.
Oh, it's very helpful. Yep.
I
It's
even
an
use it for the sustain portion of it on the snare. You know.
use it like a gate kind of,
Yeah.
or a compressor in a way with the sustain, like you say.
Yeah. You can kind of play with that and kind of take away some of that ring without cutting it. Or sometimes I do it if it's a snare that is a little too dry, I guess, too short. It kind of adds a little, almost brings out a little bit of a ring if you need it, you know?
And it's a way to just enhance the attack portion of the drum without being a giant EQ bump that, you don't want to do. But yeah, I find I put it on kick, snare, and toms a lot live.
I agree with that. Like um,
It's enhancing the drum sound.
yeah. I mean, I think when we're processing, our ideas now, I don't think they are just to process for just because we have it. We're trying to make sure that balance of the drum kit that we were talking about earlier translates all the way through the mix, and sometimes because of the mixes are heavy in the sense of instrumentation and tracks and people screaming, and we have thousands of people, and every now and then you just need that little nudge that is not necessarily a volume thing.
Exactly.
So adding something like you were saying, transient design or anything, just adds that little extra tack that just lets it poke through the mix sometimes.
Yep. Because you can't go for the volume thing. Because you're at a point where you just can't turn things up.
Correct.
You want some things to poke through. How do we make that happen?
Well, plus if you turn one thing up, then at some point you're going to think, oh, well, now that's up. I might need to turn this up too. And then, oh, now the bass seems to get lost. And now let me turn that up. Then it will never end. So those decisions need to be made, I think, in a way where they're more subtle changes, just enough to make sure it cuts through the mix,
A lot of times I find myself turning things down if I want something to stick out, as opposed to turning that thing up.
Yeah, subtractive mixing in a way, or to make room, I do that with gains a lot, as well. If,
EQ?
yeah, EQ, you EQ something down and gives you more room for gaining it up. And then you end up with what you wanted in the first place. So those are all great things that we're able to do, especially with drums. Removing stuff and subtractive EQ.
So there was a question left earlier on the Sonic Ninja page.
Uh-huh.
I want to make sure it gets addressed, and it's from Michael Sweeney.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw it just now, but it's about clang and soundscape.
Yeah, I think we mentioned something about clang before. So that applies to in-ears, right? Is that what you mean? So I haven't used clang. I tried it, and it's pretty impressive what you can do with it. To a point now, every time I say this, of course, there's always someone who pops up and say, "Oh my God, you're crazy! You should just use it." But in the spirit of keeping things a little simpler, and because a lot of times our travels doesn't permit us to travel with the gear, then I tend to keep my setup a little simpler. So using clang, I know for a fact that if I have it, I will probably won't be able to live without it because of the way I'm able to place things in my artist mix. But when I saw it, I think it was a few years back actually when I tested it. It was a NAMM, and I don't know. Maybe I should just take it on one of these days. I should just try it on like for a long period of time.
Whenever we get back to.
Whenever we get back. I mean, it's an interesting concept, and I think it's pretty cool. I do try to, use stereo imagers, and I use the digital V3 from Plugin Alliance and Brainworks that allows me to have a nice stereo spread, and I understand that's not the same. But I try to give still the listener a great experience when it comes to that. Clang, it takes it to a whole other level. It's three-dimensional. It's a whole other, experience. So I'm down for trying it, actually, since a lot of people have brought it up, and I have a few friends who have used it, and they swear by it. So
yeah, I would think, coming from the musician standpoint, if I was to be on stage with a monitor engineer, I think it could be cool if in my mix things were placed in the mix like they were on stage.
Yeah.
To me, that would make sense.
Including the depth, you mean? Like if someone's a little further back, you should be able to make him feel like they're...
Yeah, it would give you it would just give you a really cool perspective. I think, like you're playing in a space. You're not all the sonic, freak. Everything's not just bombarding you.
Yeah.
There is the separation in the space.
Do people use it? Have they used it somehow in a front of house situation? I've only heard it for in-ears.
Well, I think that's the whole immersive thing, though, isn't it? With I guess is what the soundscape is that you can place things in the mix, but I don't know. To me,
but that's more like surround-ish in a way, kind of, because they have speakers in different locations.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's as far as I would probably go with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd be great to mix a show like, Roger Waters or Pink Floyd in, quadrasound.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
I'm not going to go any further. I just said it would be great to do that. But
that was episode what? Episode 4 or episode 3 was all Pink Floyd.
That's right. We won't go there again.
No, you can anytime, of course. Dude, I've been ever since that episode. I've been listening to it all the time.
No, you have.
I've been power washing my backyard, my patio, listening to Pink Floyd. Keeps me relaxed.
That's it.
It's awesome.
Relaxed, but it makes you cry. It makes you mad.
I also play it. It's funny because I can see why you can get emotional with music like that, because it's very they were able to transmit the stuff through electronics somehow. It's beautifully done. So, we've been doing movie nights here at home outside, and right before we start, sometimes I'm playing The Wall, just to kind of, because I put a little PA behind the screen.
Eddie's walk-in music.
Yeah, I go all out when I do a movie night. I have a big screen. I just order a new projector and I put a little PA behind it.
I just turn on Netflix and sit down on the couch.
Well, that's what we do, but we just do it outside. So let's see. There was someone talking about here. Oh, so a couple things. Parallel compression, which I think we mentioned, but what percentage of dry and compress in the mix? Maybe like 65, 35 or 70, 30 kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, if you look at the subgroup, faders, it's probably, it could be -5 and -10.
Yeah.
Something like that. It just depends on at what point do I want, that parallel compressed sound to come into the drum kit and just, it when you hit it, because all of a sudden the drums just go,
yeah. And again, it's not necessarily a volume thing. All of a sudden they just go whoop.
Not volume at all.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
That whole parallel processing, I love doing it. I do it in vocals too. I do it in guitar sometimes or basses. William is asking, what panning positions do we use when panning drums? And I think we said, as far as the perspective, audience perspective and stuff, but to be more specific, like in the studio, like I said, I do, I still always do audience perspective. Now, some people, like you were mentioning, in the studio you do drummer's perspective, and live you do audience perspective. But usually, how far do you pan? Do you pan like I do for overheads? Usually, 9 and 3. If I want everything to be more centered, then I'll obviously more like 11-1.
Are you talking live now or studio?
Either. So tell me how do you do it on either? That's how I kind of approach it, depending what I'm looking for. I usually don't go any further than, I don't go all the way right or left. I don't want the tom to be like doop, doop, like I kind of try to blend it in. I do want it to have some separation, but I kind of bring it in, Same with the overheads. I try to keep them around the same place. And that's live and in the studio.
Yeah, see, live, I think I'm probably 10-2. With the toms as well, 10-2, because, I have to realize that the person that's up in the bleed, nosebleed section in house right, if the drummer plays the floor tom and it's panned all the way hard panned over here, this guy's not gonna get the stereo spread of the toms.
Yeah.
Cool for me as the mixer, but it's not cool for the listener. So, but I do want a little bit of image in my drums, but the toms never go past 10 and 2 in the spread, and maybe overheads are 9 and 3, 10 and 2 somewhere. Now in the studio, overheads are hard panned, and toms, if I got 3 rack toms, I'm going left, right, center, because in the studio, I think you can get away with hard panning stuff way more, obviously, than you can live.
Yeah. What I've noticed with overheads, I think it depends a lot on how they were recorded. And also if I'm using the overheads a lot as the drum sound. So if I'm using for the drum sound a lot, and they were recorded like literally 2 mono mics, meaning they weren't in any position to really capture a stereo image of the drum kit. They literally just focus him on overheads like this or whatever. Then I don't go too far, because then if I go too far, it just sounds like 2 mono mics separated, and there's no content in the middle, right? So I try to bring him in and create some kind of imaging between that and the direct mics. I think it's, now if a drum kit was recorded with overheads that are placed in an XY, or they really took their time and position, then maybe not XY, but in a way where the whole kit gets captured evenly. Yeah, you notice right away, as soon as you start panning it, it still sounds full, and you actually hear the toms kind of panning themselves. You hear the hi-hat a little bit more this way, the right a little more this way, and it kind of makes sense to kind of go full on left, right. Yeah. But I guess we have to, at that point, listen to it and see what's going on there. That's a good question about panning.
I go big and wide. That's my goal in studio mixing. Big and wide.
Let's see here. Alicia Turner Divin says Master Bass, wah. She's busting our chops.
Do we have a question for her she should be able to answer?
Yeah. But you will know better, though.
I know. I think she likes the master bus.
Soundscape will be more immersive. Let's see here. Anybody else have a question over there for my Floyd addiction? Yeah. The L Acoustics new setup is similar to Clank, but for front of house, yeah. Let's see. Big and wide, yes. Well, for now, there are no other questions. And let me see. What about mics? How do you tend to mic your drum? Or, I mean, obviously we work together, so we obviously know how we mic our drum set, but maybe for who hasn't seen our setup, you can run them through a little bit of how we're miking our drum kit, like with Enrique, and then maybe compare that to other situations where you're miking the kit.
Well, with Enrique, it's 1 mic on the kick drum, snare top and bottom.
What? Wait.
What?
1 mic on the kick drum?
Yes, I know you're going to say 1 mic on the kick drum.
What world do we live in?
Yeah, don't you want to do a dynamic and a condenser combination?
Yeah.
No, I don't. You want to know why? Because Enrique is a madman on stage, and when he starts grabbing the plexi, guess what happens to the dynamic mic that's sitting in the hole?
Yeah.
What happens?
But that's not really the reason. I don't feel that we need it.
Actually, I don't feel we need it either. And when I first came to the gig, I like a 91, but I've always paired a 91 with another microphone.
Yeah.
For the obvious reason, the 91 is going to give me the attack and the dynamic is going to give me the punch. But once I started using 1 microphone, first off, there's way more to a mix than just a kick drum. So,
not according to some people when I've been in some shows.
But when I realized that this 1 microphone is going to serve my purpose, this is all I need. I never have felt the need to ever add another microphone into the kick drum. Never. And we could do it. We'd find a way to keep it from moving, and we'd mount it in whatever we do. But I really don't miss
a second mic. Me neither.
Don't ever miss it. I mean, there's a fair amount of EQ on the 91. There's some compression. There's the transient designer. There's some things happening that make it what I need.
I mean, if we really thought oh man, we need to have an a mic to be able to control more of the low end and blah 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 blah. Then we just split it up on the console. We just process it completely different.
That's true too.
Maximize
Exactly.
it, low pass it, and just use it as a sub mic. Like the information is still there. All the frequency information is still there.
Amazing on a digital desk. Just double patch something.
Oh my God, like it's so easy. Like we can, but we don't. I don't think we need it. Like, and it sounds good. I mean, I don't hear any complaints.
No, never.
And then so that was the kick. So what about the rest of the kit?
Yeah, snare top and bottom. Then we've got snare 2, which is just snare top. I mean, yeah, it's just a top mic. Hi-hat, 4 toms, and 2 overheads.
Now, what are those mics starting from the snare again?
Okay, from the snare, well, you don't want to know what the kick mic is?
You already said it.
It's 91.
You already said it earlier. That's why I didn't ask.
Yeah, the snare's a
Hot
DPA
shot.
20.
Go ahead.
DPA 2011.
Yeah.
Snare top, DPA 4099 on snare bottom. Snare 2 is a 2011 as well. Hi-hat is a 2011. All the toms are 4099s, and the overheads are 2011s as well. And same with the percussion.
Yep.
Percussion, we have a couple 2011s, one for overhead on the
bells, the timbales, the bells, and then one for the hand percussion, the chimes.
Yeah, and then all the other individual drums and the congas are 4099s.
Same with the percussion that is wireless, which in our case is we have 2 sets of, we have 2 cajones, or cajones, I should say, and then 1 set of bongos, and they're wireless through a Shure Accent digital pack. But it's all DPA mics, and except for the kick drum. And man, they just sound great. I mean, we always end up talking about these because they, as we were saying earlier, it's all about the source. They allow us to capture, the source as we hear. Like if we were to stand in front of the drum kit and the drums sound a certain way, that's what we get through those mics.
That's exactly how, when someone says, what does the mic sound like? I say, it sounds like whatever you put it in front of or on. And when you apply some EQ to the channel strip, you're actually EQing the instrument. You're not EQing the microphone. That's the best way I can describe it, because for me, there's certain microphones that I can put on an instrument and I automatically know what I have to do to that microphone, or I automatically know what it's going to sound like. With these mics, it sounds like whatever you put it on.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive what they do. And then for the combination of it with the wireless, I think is great. I think it's very stable. We never have any issues. I think that's sort of a great combo. DPA mics on Shure transmitters. To me, it's unbeatable. We can't go wrong with that.
I don't think we've ever had an issue with a mic failure.
No.
That I can recall.
I was talking to Leonardo from DPA the other day, and he was bringing up. Remember when I told him remember the video screen? It was like a turntable, and the whole video screen fell on the back line. Yeah. And you see the mics just flying all over, and like just the pieces of backline flying over, and everything got put back together, and every single mic worked. Nothing happened to it. And basically,
I've seen Gabriel take one of those 4099s, the cabling, and like wrap it around both of his fists and just go like this and just jerk on it.
And then put it back on and it worked.
They just don't break.
Yeah. They're pretty amazing. And obviously sonically, and of course they're durable and all that stuff. So that's, now as far as mics, I know we just explained how we mic up our kit. Have you ever spot mic'd cymbals instead of just overheads, or is that something that you even foresee in the future doing, or do you find the need for it? Or
I did have that. I used that when I filled in for a guy mixing a band. All the overheads were individually mic'd. Man, there must have been like 10 microphones for cymbals. And of course they were all panned, and I understand the concept and, how it filled that space. But to me, I was miking cymbals and I was EQing cymbals. It wasn't like, how does that work into the drum kit? Because the microphones are underneath, pointed up at the cymbals.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really it was just a different way of doing it. It was about miking cymbals as opposed to capturing your drum kit from the overheads. So for me, it's always 2 microphones over top the drums. I don't really see the need to do that. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have a ride mic as well, but we've never put a ride mic up with Van's kit because those overheads are so open and transparent that when he hits the bell of the ride, it's there.
Yeah.
But again, it's what is your vision for the drum kit? What is your vision for the overheads? Mine is the drum kit. It's the whole thing. I understand the concept of individually miking cymbals. I don't feel the need to do it.
Now, I've seen people also do the overheads, and this happens a lot when doing TV, or, because obviously aesthetics are very important. So if you're going to do a TV show and you have this big condensers or whatever and they're somehow blocking the screens, sometimes the directors will ask you, hey, can you just put this somewhere else? It's one song, Most of the time, I mean, I will never argue that. I was like, of course, whatever you need. They're just cymbals. They're going to get picked up by everything here. Not a big deal. Usually you're in a small stage. But I've seen people do that even as a common practice where they mic the cymbals with a condenser just like this, like a 414 or something, but they're close to the cymbals and the cymbals are right here. To me, the waviness of the cymbal, I would think that you're just going to hear whoosh.
That's exactly what you do here.
But some people like doing that. I understand in a special situation, you're on TV, I get it. But every now and then you'll see something or somewhere where they're doing that, and maybe it's not an issue to them, but I would assume that that's what you would hear, or even in the in-ears will be even more apparent for someone, But I guess to each their own, But it's just a different way of doing things. I tried it. It only took me one time to try it in the studio years ago, and I was like, oh yeah, no, that's not gonna work.
There was only one time where I didn't have overheads up atop the drums, and that was working with Butch in Garbage, because his drum sounds are all samples. So, I needed to capture the hi-hat and the cymbals, so I put a 40-50 in between in a figure 8 pattern to capture that. And then on the other side, there was I think another cymbal over here, and a 40-50 in a cardioid pattern, like you say, kind of aimed like that, but it wasn't out in front of the cymbal. It was more a little bit underneath it, so I still got the cymbal because it wasn't about capturing any tom sounds with his drum kit because it was all triggers.
Well, that gave you more control because you didn't have to worry about capturing drums, just cymbals, right?
Exactly. So it's just a matter of, filling the space of the sample drums with the hardware. But it worked fine. Worked fine for that.
Let's see here. Oris is saying the main difference of panning, exactly like Brad said, the panning on the monitors. Yeah, he had a situation where a drummer would freak out. Oris mentioned that, Oris Henry, that if the panning wasn't right, I'm going back a little bit, backtracking, but if the panning wasn't right for the drummer, they would freak out. And yeah, of course. Anything that has to do with monitors, I definitely do musician's perspective, obviously. And then, even for guitars, or background singers, if they're standing a little more here, more there, then if the drummer's here, I place everybody kind of where he can see him. Especially for him, it's great because he doesn't move. But yeah, for everybody, usually on stage is their perspective, and that makes obviously a difference. Let's see here, who else? Let's see. I don't see any more questions. But let's see. My cousin Juan Carlos just joined. What's going on, Juan Carlos? Juan Carrion joined as well a little while ago. But we kind of get into the end a little bit. We're going. How long have we been talking here? Well, an hour and
15 minutes.
An hour, yeah, 18, but minus the intro, 1:15. That's pretty cool. We had some great questions, great participation.
I think we covered a lot to do with drums as well.
Yes. Did we miss anybody's questions or comments that would be worth highlighting here? I hope I didn't miss anybody. But yeah, I mean, we covered that, drummers, drum processing, mics. I mean, I could talk a little bit about, how I approaching my drums as far as space goes. Oh yeah, maybe we should talk about space also. Maybe if you want to start with that, maybe as far as effects for drums, like what's your, because I don't think we touched that, right? Effects on drums or ambience.
Yeah. My take on drum effects are, especially for live. I mean, I'm already in an arena and it's already a big cavernous space as it is. So for me, I just want to put the drums in a space. I'm going to say I generally go for a plate, everywhere. Toms. I even put a little bit of verb on the kick. I know people might think I'm crazy, but why not? I want it to be part of the drum kit. So there's verb on the kick. Not as much verb as there is on a snare drum, but there's some. And it's generally around 1.5 second decay, maybe, plate. And then every now and then I've experimented with like a short room burst, like on a tom or something, just to get the tom to pop. On the snare drum, to get the snare to pop a little bit. But other than that, it's very simple. It's pretty much, a little bit of verb on the kit. And it's very tastefully used, because if there's ever a spot where Van is playing by himself, I don't really want to hear the reverb. I want to know it's there because the drums are wet and then they're in that space. But I don't like hearing that explosiveness of reverb on drums.
Plus, also, in your case, you're not recreating a space because you're inside the space already. You're using it to enhance your tone already, right?
Exactly.
Is that fair? Okay. Yeah, for me, because of the isolation and the feeling of being isolated and everything's so dry or could potentially be very dry in their in-ears, then my take on it is always to, besides having the touch-up, like you mentioned, of having certain reverbs give them that sound, explosive sound, or just for texture, I also have some ambient that I use that is strictly to kind of recreate what they're seeing. In other words, if they're in an arena, if it's bone dry, it's just weird. I gotta give him a little bit of ambience, and sometimes because of the way my bus compression and bus processing is going to the in-ears, there's been a time where someone goes, whether it's a drummer or a singer goes, they test their mic by themselves. They go, oh, there's a lot of reverb, and obviously because I'm running, with accents, the way it's a little different than with house. Then all of a sudden I go, well, check it out in context. Let's see how it sounds with everybody performing, and then if it's still too much, then of course I'll be happy to turn it down. And then as soon as everybody starts playing, they're like, oh man, it sounds right on the money, because I still feel that I'm in the arena, but I can hear myself clearly, but I don't sound like just bone dry here in my face. It gives him a sense of space, and I think that's important, especially for people wearing in-ears. I have the luxury though that you don't have necessarily because they're plugged up, so I can go for a little bit more of a sort of studio mix plus a little ambience to the overall mix if needed.
So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
If, let's say we go in and we do a private gig now, and it's for 500 people, and it's a ballroom type thing, and it's vastly different than an arena. Will you change the ambience and the verb in the mix, in the ear mix, to reflect the smaller space?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no, depending on what I'm hearing back through it. It depends on how loud that room is, how loud the reflections are. But I also try to preserve the experience for them. So if it's sort of a small place, I don't try to replicate the smallness of it, because then it'll be boring to them.
Right.
So I try to still make it sound exciting. So every now and then I might change the length of the verb, but keep in mind that I do use the fact that we're in an arena and they do feel that length already. So it's not like I'm adding another 5 seconds or 7 seconds of reverb. You know, it's still shorter than that, but it's sort of a blend. I'm trying to use the tail end of what the room gives me on top of the reverb that I'm giving them. If we're in a smaller room, then I'm in control of what the ambience is and what they're experiencing on stage. So I try to gauge it depending on where we are, you know.
That was a good question, wasn't it?
It was a good question. Was that yours?
That was my question.
Damn, Ninja, that was good. That was good. So anyway, I think, is anybody asking any other questions? I think we're good. Oh, Carlos Parker just joined now. Come on, Carlos. A little late to the party, my friend.
Missed the whole thing.
Missed the whole thing. And he probably not even going to watch it later either. Are you going to watch it later? Anyway, for those who were watching earlier and you know, we mentioned, you know, some of our favorite mics and stuff, I'm going to put on the description once this is on YouTube. I'm going to put on the description, you know, where to find those mics and the wireless stuff that we're using. So check it out. Thank you for everybody for joining us in this drum discussion. We have some amazing questions from people who joined us and shared their stories or had questions for Brad and I. And Bradley Dean, you're always amazing. Your beard's looking good.
You gotta wonder what it will look like when I get out of the house.
Don't cut it. Don't shave it or nothing. Just leave it. Leave it. Make that your protest symbol. So nothing until we come back.
I don't know how Billy Gibbons does it. I don't know how he's had that beard for almost his whole career. Like, to me, you wake up in the morning and it's stuck to my cheek, and
really,
it's just weird.
It doesn't make it hot, like to sleep on that thing?
Not really. No, it doesn't get hot.
But you're hairy. I can see your arms are hairy too. Not to rag on you, but I'm just saying.
Don't talk about it.
Don't talk about me like that. It's like Harry Potter. Anyway, yeah. Okay. Now we're rambling.
I think we've run out of things to talk about.
Yes, now. Bradley Dean. Anything you want to say to anybody out there about drums before we leave?
No, I don't think so.
You covered everything, right?
Covered it all.
All right.
I do want to point out that July 13th and July 15th at 1 p.m. Central Time, I'm going to be doing my Fixing to Get Mixing class live, and it's going to be through JBL and Harman, so you'll have to watch for the post for that because I'm not exactly sure what the format's going to be. But I'm going to figure out a way to do my 6-hour live class and break it up into 2 segments somehow or other. July 13th and July 15th.
Very cool. Don't miss it, please. And I'm sure you'll be posting another type of flyer or event or something so people can...
Yep. And I'm going to put these suckers up for sale one of these days too.
You are?
Yep. I think so.
Cool.
Did you ever find the one I sent you?
No.
Okay.
Fixing to Get Mixing, everybody. Check it out. All right. Sonic Ninjas.
Instagram. Facebook.
YouTube. Sign up, subscribe, support us. We're just trying to have fun and share our experiences and thoughts with you guys. So we appreciate your time. And we'll see you soon, hopefully, episode 7. Later.
Later.
Bradley Dean, I'll see you later, buddy. Love you. Take care.
Take care.